Hey everybody, Charles for HumbleMechanic.com, and today we're going to be talking about failed wiring harnesses. Alright, so this giant jumble of wires is the trunk wiring harness on Volkswagen CC 2009 and up. But before we check out this harness, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is of course Deutsch Auto Parts. These guys are the Volkswagen Audi parts experts. They have great service, incredible prices, a ton of awesome DIY videos. Hey, if you watch a few, you might even see this guy in them. So check them out at shopDAP, which is DeutschAutoparts.com, and I will of course put a link in the show notes for you guys to check them out. All right, so like I said, this giant mess of wires is the wiring harness for a deck or a trunk lid on a Volkswagen CC. This is how we're able to have lighting inside the deck lid and still be able to open and close the trunk. These wires obviously provide power and ground to all the lights inside that deck. So the way it works is we have a connector junction in the body of the car. These connectors plug in. Our harness routes all up through the hinge of the trunk and plugs into all of our lighting and everything in the trunk lid. The cool thing about wiring harnesses is they tend to find like a happy place. And you can see here, this is the curve of where it goes up into the deck lid. So when we have the trunk closed, we look like this. And as the trunk opens and closes, you can see where the wire is stressed at that curve right there. So what might be some symptoms that we have if we have an issue with our wiring harness? Well, we may or may not have several different lights out. We may have lights that are intermittently out. We may also have the light out indicator on, but not actually see any lights in the deck lid out. Basically, if this harness is a problem, anything in the portion of the trunk that opens could potentially have a problem. How do we diagnose it? Well, the easiest way is to pull the trunk trim back and actually just take a look right at this connection junction here. You can see on this one it's actually broken in two different spots, right here near the connectors as well as in the bend right here. So a visual inspection is going to be our best bet, but that's only if it's broken down here in the bottom. We may have issues further up the harness and even into where it goes up into the trunk. So we can do things like wiggle tests. We can grab a hold of the harness and move it around and manipulate it and see what happens. We can also break out our ohm meter, remove the trunk trim, and actually check resistance from the connectors here to the connectors up in the trunk. Remember to unplug the connectors before you start checking resistance. But odds are you're going to have a failure in this lower portion, which is actually the portion inside the trunk. So what about time to failure? Well, this one is 100% dependent on how often you use the trunk. So if you're opening the trunk 50 times a day, your harness is potentially going to fail faster than someone that opens a trunk once or twice a week. Basically, the more you use the trunk, the more likely this is going to be an issue. So with wiring, there's always the question of, do we fix it or do we replace the harness? I did a video on the Mark V Jetta door harnesses where the repair isn't really a good idea because all that happens if the brake is here and we make this repair, it's just going to move down one because the wires are still flexing. For the trunk harness, it really depends on where the brake is. If the brake is one wire near the connector junction, it's probably worth repairing. If the brake is like this one where there's multiple brakes on multiple wires, then I would go ahead and replace the entire harness. You could repair this, but the more you cut and splice, the more resistance you add into the circuit, the more likely you're going to have a problem down the road. So replacing this entire harness is going to be the best quality overall repair. Now I know some of you guys are awesome at soldering and can do a really good job with butt connectors, but at every junction, again, you're adding resistance, so this is going to be the best repair. And this is usually what we recommend at the dealership is replacing this harness, especially when you get into brakes up near the bend of the wiring, because the more you flex it here, it's just going to break down a little bit in the wire. So is this a DIY? This is actually a pretty easy DIY, whether you're replacing it or repairing it. If you're replacing the harness, the trickiest part is fishing the wires back through the tube that functions as the hinge. It's really not that difficult, and these connectors are pretty small, so it's easy to do. And when it comes to plugging it in on the other side, everything kind of falls where it's supposed to be, so it's really not that bad. Now, if you're repairing the wires, you're going to be making this repair in the trunk unless you take the harness out anyway. So you might be, laying up like this making a wiring repair. Not a big deal as long as you're safe, but again, I really think that the best repair for multiple wires on this harness is to just go ahead and put a new harness in. You can actually see they tried to make some repairs on this wiring harness, but due to the multiple breaks on multiple wires, there's 10 wires on this harness, it was better just, again, to go ahead and put a new harness in. All right, guys, I'm gonna wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, post it in the comments section below. Hey, if you like the video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblemechanic.com. You can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the blog, humblemechanic.com, and obviously on YouTube. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.